Blessed in a Cursed World. Chapter 1. The Red Sky. Cormac O'Dwyer awoke to the smell of salt and blood. The sea was calm that morning, but the sky was wrong. A sickly shade of red stretched across the horizon, casting westward coast in a light that made the world look feverish. He had seen bad storms before, since the Atlantic rage against the cliffs and swallow ships whole, but this was different. The sky looked wounded. He stepped outside his small cottage, barefooted on the cold earth, and listened. The village should have been alive with sound, fishermen hauling their boats, women trading in squares, the church bell marking the hour, but all he heard was the wind, whispering through the empty streets. Something had happened. He took a step forward and nearly tripped over the body. It was Neil Sullivan, the butcher's son, or at least what was left of him. His skin was the colour of rotting fish, his eyes milky and lifeless. Flies already crawled in and out of his mouth. But what struck Cormac most was the smell. Not just the stink of death, but something deeper, something sick. The sickness had come. For months there had been rumours across the sea. A plague, they said. A sickness that just didn't kill but changed people. At first no one believed it. Ireland has survived things before. Famine, war, the Black Death. But then the ships stopped coming. The radios fell silent. And now here it was. Cormac stumbled backwards, his breath coming fast. He had to find Marie and Owen, his wife and son. They had gone to the market that morning. If the sickness was here, a scream shattered the silence. Cormac turned and ran. Chapter 2. The End of Mercy. The market square was a nightmare. Corpses lay in twisted heaps, their faces frozen in terror. A woman crawled across the cobblestones, reaching for a child that would never cry again. Blood slicked the ground, turning the cracks between the stones into rivers of red. And in the centre of it all they stood, the infected. They were not dead, not yet. Their bodies convulsed with unnatural spasms, their veins blackened as if ink had spilled between their skin. Their mouths twitched, gasping like fish torn from the water. But their eyes were the worst part, cloudy, unfocused, yet aware. Cormac spotted Marie near a toppled cart. She was holding on, shielding him with her body. He sprinted toward them, heart hammering against his ribs. Marie! She turned, eyes wide with relief. Then terror. Cormac, don't! Too late. One of them lunged at him from his side. Its fingers, once human, now twisted into something jagged and wrong, clawed at his arm. He shoved it back, but not before its nails racked across his skin. A wound opened just above his wrist, shallow but enough to draw blood. Cormac, Marie's voice was strangled with fear. He turned to her, but she was staring at his arm. The wound was already closing. Cormac barely registered the pain before the flesh stitched itself back together. Within seconds, there was nothing left but dried blood and clean skin. Marie's face turned pale. What the hell, she whispered. Cormac didn't have time to answer. The infected were closing in, twitching and jerking like marionettes and broken strings. He grabbed Marie's hand, pulled her up and ran. The world had ended, and somehow they had been spared. Chapter 3. The Road of Ash. The world did not die in fire or flood. It rotted. Days passed, then weeks. Towns became graveyards. Cities turned to silent tombs. The sickness spread like wildfire, twisting people into something other. They did not simply die, they lingered, caught between life and death. Their bodies spasming as the infected hollowed them out from the inside. Some whispered that they could still think, still feel, trapped inside rotting flesh, screaming in silence. Cormac did not know if this was true. He did not want to know. He only knew that he could not die, not like them, not like anyone. Since that day in the market, wounds did not stay open. Hunger gonded him, but he never wasted away. Water that made others reach did nothing to him. He had seen enough sickness to understand what should have happened when the infected scratched him. Yet here he was, alive when the world demanded death. But Marie and Owen were not. He had buried them himself beneath the ruins of their home. He had held Owen's tiny body in his arms, willing whatever cruel force had blessed him to do something, but no miracle came, no second chance. He was alone, and so he walked. Chapter 4. The Dead City. Dublin was a graveyard. Cormac had to go there because he had nowhere else to go. He had heard rumours that survivors had forfeited to Trinity College, and the city's old stone walls had become a final refuge. But when he arrived, he found only death. The city was swallowed by rot. Cars clogged the streets, their windows shattered, doors left open as if their owners had tried to flee on foot. The Liffey River ran black with thick bodies and filth. The air smelt of decay, but underneath it was something worse, a metallic tang, like rusted iron, like blood that had been left to bake in the sun. He moved cautiously, keeping to the alleyways, his knife always within reach. The affected could be anywhere. He had learnt that they did not always make a sound, that they could stand perfectly still for hours, waiting, watching. The college was ahead. He approached carefully, stepping over shattered glass, past a burnt-out bus, still leaking smoke into the air. The main gates were closed, but the walls were high. He could climb them. Then he saw it, a message scrawled into something dark and dried across the stone. It read, "They can still hear you." Cormac froze, his breath caught in his throat, a whisper of movement behind him. He turned just in time. The thing that had once been a man was on him in an instant. Its skin sagged, grey and peeling, lips pulled back in a permanent, rigorous grin. Its eyes clouded, but still aware, locked onto his, and then it screamed. And not just a mindless skirk, not hunger, but a warning scream. Cormac barely had time to shove it back before it heard them. Dozens, maybe more, footsteps rustling, a chorus of sick, wet breath filling the air. The city was awake. Cormac ran for his life.